I'm on air. How cool is this? Gonna wait a few minutes to get some folks tapped into us this morning or this afternoon. Um, so today's Tuesday. It's at 1 o'clock. I have the pleasure of bringing one of my favorite classes back to you guys. It's called Shift Happens. Now, pre-COVID, PC, I used to bring this class in person, which I absolutely loved in person. But when COVID hit, we kind of had to shift our whole focus. And so we started and needed to do all of our classes virtual. So I did this a few months into COVID, and we thought that this would probably be a phenomenal time for us to bring this back to the masses. And it's Shift Happens, and I absolutely love the topic of this, mainly because we shift every day, but and predominantly I love the name of it because it's really what we want to say, but I'm not going to say it out in public in these classes, but we all know that shift happens to each and every one of us. We're in a re-shifting right now as we made major changes to shift our whole life when COVID came in. We adapted to that quite well. And now we are shifting back to moving things to what our new norm is. And in life, we have all of these normal things that happen to us that causes natural shifts. For example, we're getting into spring, so our seasons naturally shift. Daylight savings time actually shift. So the premise of what I like to bring to you guys is ways that we can change our mindsets and use our powerful brains in changing our thought processes. Our brains are very powerful, and they have this plasticity that we can change all of the pathways in our brain. And so that's what we're going to do. I'm a huge proponent of taking the things that are within my control to help manifest good stuff in my life. And I do that all day long, every day. As soon as I get up in the morning, I start that mindset of shifting my thought processes and my mind. Because in a world that is so uncontrollable right now, I recognize what's in me that I can control. And I know a lot of our classes are focused on to understand what's in your power to control and what's not in our power to control, and how do we adapt and learn to deal with things like that. But today we're going to talk about some cool stuff. I don't ever like to start out a session with going through statistics, but I think this is a pretty cool statistic. Is that the average person has more than 60,000 thoughts per day. 60,000 thoughts. That is a bunch of thoughts per day. And 95% of these same thoughts are the ones that we always think about. There are those recurring thoughts. But out of the 60,000 thoughts that we have rummaging through our brain every day, 80% of our thoughts are negative. So you're talking 60,000 things get bombarded in our brain. It's hard for me to wrap my head around any amount that's 60,000. But to wrap my head around the percentage of 80% of those thoughts are negative. That's hard to wrap your head around, is that although all of the thoughts that keep coming in, that majority of them are going to be negative. And how do I stop that? We call these the automatic negative thoughts, the ants. And what we're going to talk about today are those ants. And we're going to talk about some ways to kill these ants. And sometimes I think it's really good that you start identifying what these ants are. And this is kind of raw. It's kind of getting personal and getting in touch with why you're thinking what you think. A lot of things that are embedded to us in the trauma that we had, some things that we brought on ourselves, some things as a child that were out of our control, but we still carry all of that with us today. So these automatic negative thoughts, there's about 9 of them that we're going to talk about today. And the first ant, or automatic negative thoughts, is the all or nothing ant. That seems to be the number one for me. And we'll talk about those. Now, the all or nothing ant is those ants that treat words like maybe, sometimes, and perhaps as 4-letter words, preferring to speak in terms of always or never, all or none. It's that all or nothing, and everyone or every time. It's that black and white thinking where it gives you no room for any kind of gray or any middle ground on that. And we know that things are not always, because it's not always going to be dark, because it's going to be light in the morning. It's not always going to be raining. At some point, it's going to stop. But for examples, why do bad things always happen to me? Who thinks that? I think that. I think that a lot. That's one of my biggest pests, is that ant number 1, is that all or nothing. It's either always going to be good or always going to be bad. And we know human nature, that's not the case. There's going to be good and bad in everything that we do. So, every time my husband never listens to me. Really? Sometimes I think that. But it's when you use those really hard, fast, concrete words, always, never, everyone, all, every time. And you have to kind of sit and think when you say that to yourself, and really kind of counterbalance that. Maybe today it seems like everybody's pulling out in front of me. Everybody's in my way today. Is that really the case, that everybody is always doing that? No. So I have to shift that thought process. I have to shift when I use verbiage that means a situation is all white and all black. That's not life. And then it doesn't happen like that. So it helps us to be cognitive of when we say things, and even my inner voice when I say, I always say that. I'm never going to do that. It never turns out the way I thought it was going to. I have to stop that and really kind of think that through. In all actuality, it doesn't. It never ever happens like that. There are some things in our life that we can use those words that have validation, but that all or nothing is an automatic negative thought process, and it's we've created that pathway in our brain that we automatically go to that mindset, that we've created that channel. So that's ant number 1. that pesky little ant number one. It's that always or nothing mentality. I know there's some folks out there that probably are thinking, yeah, that does happen. Hey, Darlene, my buddy. So we're going to talk about ant number two, that pesky other little ant. It's just the bad ants. And let's talk about that. Just the bad ant is unable to see anything good or positive in the world. Does anybody have anybody in their life that if you feel like that no matter what the scenario or the situation is, it is always going to be bad. It's always going to be negative. The sun's shining today. Yeah, but that makes all the pollen come out. So think about the people in your life that no matter what good is going on in their life, they are going to pick something so negative and so unruly about that situation. They're going to, it's a normal trajectory in their mind because that's what they have known their entire life. So that's where their brain is automatically going to gear towards. So they are the ones that can't see anything good or anything positive in any situation. And that zaps your energy. That pulls the life out of you. Even when you were working on yourself, and you know you woke up and you recognize that it's probably not going to be the best of days. So you're working on that inner voice. You're working on that inner dialogue to try everything that you can, all the tools in your little toolbox to keep you positive. And one person pulls one negative thing or says something that catches you so off guard that you're going to allow that to change your mindset for that day. We know people like this, don't we? Sometimes, oh yeah, Debbie Downer. That's what I keep going back to when I talk about just the bad ants on that. It's always there's something that's like wah wah wah, and it's hard to be around people like that because you feel like you've got your guard on and you've got these bracelets that you're just kind of pinging all of this negative energy off of all these comments off of. That sometimes you're in a good place that you can fight these off, but it's not always like that. That we're constantly working on ourselves, and sometimes if we're not in the mindset to be able to deflect all of that, it is a negative mindset is far more contagious than a positive one because it's just as easy. Because there's no fight that we have to prevent us from going to that negative side. Unfortunately, being positive is something that we continuously have to work on every minute of the day. For me, I do. And so if I have somebody in my life that I know that I am always going to have a rebuttal for, that, yeah, but, this happened, the water heater broke and it's that Chicken Little, the whole world's coming to an end. And I'm like, yeah, but think of the money that we'll save when we get a new one. Think of right now that we're able to buy a new water heater. And let's think of that, because on hindsight, if you think about the negative situations in your life or the valleys that you've gone through, once we're able to get through that and to the other side, and you look at the situation on the other side, there's always going to be something that we're going to be able to glean from that has worked out for us in our favor. Let's think about maybe that you got fired from a job and your whole world is collapsing because your whole life was revolved around that job. But you find a new one, and the new job is far better than you ever thought about that old job. And maybe you really didn't like that old job, but you've become stagnant and you really weren't going to do anything or go anywhere in this old job because you got comfortable. And so life happens, and you had to make some changes. And not all changes are bad. Sometimes we have to push through that fear, have that faith over that fear. But this shift happens, helps us to start recognizing that. I'm getting some phenomenal comments. Tanisha said, I lost everything. I felt that by losing, I gained insight to focus on my self-care. See, that's what I'm talking about. Now that I will lose my job and my world collapse, I'm hoping that a new job to be safe and it will, because look what you've already gone through and experienced. So you know through your whole life history what you've gone through before. What you're going through now is what you're going to come out even better on the other side. Thanks for that comment. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, so we're talked about just the bad ants, is the inability to see anything positive in any situation. And sometimes we have to dig in there, and we've really got to search for those positive things. But I challenge you to start doing that. This is a habit. This is a habit where it takes a while to break. And it takes 21 days to kind of overcome a habit. So this is something that you really is not, because it's an automatic negative thought. These things just push into our brain. And so these are things that we're going to have to continuously work on in order to kind of change that plasticity, change those neural pathways in our brains to get to that side. Sometimes we're going to be as far reaching, and there's so much going on in our lives today and so many things happening, and it's sometimes very difficult to find the positive, to find the good out of a situation. That sometimes it may be that I am just getting up out of my bed today, and that's a positive change. And I was able to do that. Even if it's the most minute thing, we're starting to change our brains and starting moving it towards surely finding and looking for those positive things, where looking for them we'll be able to find that easier and easier. So we talked about the all or nothing. All of these are probably going to be, they're going to hit us really hard in the gut, because we know that we do this. And the ant number 3 is the guilt beating ants. The guilt beating automatic negative thought. Guilt is not a healthy motivator of behavior, but yet it has so much power over us, because historically we go back and we live in that shame and that guilt and that trauma that it keeps replaying in our brains, that we can't move beyond that. These guilt-beating ants are not only counterproductive to our personal goals, but lead to some self-defeating decisions and far less joy in our life, because we keep reverting back to all that yucky in our history, in our life, whether it was years previous or maybe it was just yesterday. We continue to bring that automatic thought into our brain till we relive those same emotions. We certainly didn't like living through them when we were going through them. And we certainly don't like them in our brains moving forward. Statements like, I should call my family more often. I just need to try harder. I need to eat healthier. I need to do this. I need to set more goals. And those are guilts that maybe have were embedded into our life as a child, which there's not a lot of control over. And it may be embedded into us because of the decisions that we've made and the guilt that we put on ourselves. And these are really powerful things. But what this does, it overrides any positive direction that we're trying to go to. We're making these great strides. We're making these great goals, and we're working really hard to take care of our positive self-talk. And one comment or one sound or one vision or one thought that just pops in our head can take all of that away. And so we need to learn how to become more gentle with ourselves and have more mercy and grace for ourselves, and to redirect that negative thinking, redirect that guilt-ridden thinking. Sometimes we go back to a thought that happened so many years ago, and you're thinking, how in the hell did that just pop in my head? But it comes in, and our thought, we run away with it. It starts just overtaking everything in our brain at that time until we have made ourselves absolutely miserable and absolutely unhappy because we allowed that one particular ant drill into that positive mind track that we're trying to rebuild into our brains. And to me, all of these are really powerful negative thought processes that we have. But I think, especially for us that are in recovery, that seem to bounce back to that. And that's very easy to do unless we stop it. Tynesha said, each day I try to say a positive affirmation to see more positive, even if it's a tough situation. I swear by that. I swear by that. You think about in the mornings when you first wake up and your brain just starts firing, and it starts just, all of these thoughts start coming in, and you're just getting bombarded. I think we forget that we have that control to stop it. We forget that we have the opportunity to decide what's going to go on in our head, our thoughts. And so we have the ability to stop that spinning of our thoughts and say, wait a minute. That's one thing I have control of. I know I have control of right now in my life is what's going on in here. And I choose in the morning, like you, Tanisha, I choose in the morning to take control of those thoughts. And it's like, I kind of look at it like a dog on a leash. That you can, if you have one of those expendable leashes to let the dog wander all over the place, of course that dog's going to wander all over the place. But if you put some controls on that leash, and that controls where you need your dog to go. And so sometimes I feel like when I wake up in the morning, my thought process is unleashed. But I have the handle to that leash right here. So I take control over that. I take control on how I want to start my day. what thoughts that I want to go on in my day, how I'm going to set this day up. And I get to choose that. God willing, every morning that I wake up, it is my choice to be able to set that foundation of what my day is going to be. And I do that. Sometimes I like to sit and let my mind wander, because sometimes I come up with some really cool stuff if I don't leash it. But if I know that I'm getting this automatic negative thought process starting to gear up, then I pull it back and I change that. I change the script in my brain. I change the channel to that part of my brain, because we have that in our hand. I remember one time sitting and watching TV with my husband, and he was flipping the channels because we have two totally different tastes in what we want to watch. And I'm sitting watching, he's a gearhead and loves to watch these car shows. So I'm sitting on the couch just watching these car shows, and he gets up and goes outside and does something outside. In the meantime, I'm sitting here watching these car shows until I realize I have the remote control. I can change that channel. And I love that visual. I'm such a visual person, so I have to use a lot of that in how I stop my ants coming in my brain. So I had the ability to take that remote control and change that channel. And we all have that ability. And lots of times throughout the day, I have to keep changing that channel. If it's something I don't want to watch, I'm going to change that channel. And we all have that sitting in the palm of our hand. By the time we wake up, to the time we leave the house, to the time we do whatever we do during the day, whether you work or you stay home or whatever your dynamics of your life may be right now, that we are always in that flux of change, which is good. Sometimes that adds fear to us. Tanisha, you need to be on this class with me. You are dead on of the things I love to talk about, is setting that positive intention and to forgive yourself when you fail and to reset or reboot. Kind of like my TV analogy. We have to do that periodically a lot. And it's depending on the day, depending on the life event, depending on the situation, depending on where your mind is. Is it going down the rabbit hole? And I need to get in there and bring it back. And but I think the most important thing is to recognize that we have that within the grasp of our hands to be able to do that. Your mind is so powerful. It can manifest. Anything in your mind can become your reality. That's what perception is. And if I wake up in the morning and I start my day, this is going to be a bad day, then I have already set the tone of what my day is going to be. And I don't want to do that. Who wants to get up in the morning and say, this is going to be a crappy day? Maybe, in all actuality, who knows? You may be up against a lot of stuff that you foresee that it is not setting itself up to be a good day. But it's something within me and the control I have on how I want to maneuver through that day. And it's my choice, my favorite word. So we have those guilt-beating ants. And that's a really powerful one for people in their lived experience and in their recovery, because we have a tendency to go back to those places that are not happy. And we know if we travel there, sometimes it's really hard to get back out of it. So we have to, it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work. So the next ant that we have is the labeling, labeling ant. When you label yourself or someone else with a negative term, you rob your brain of the ability to assess the situation or people properly. If you label yourself an idiot, guess what? You're telling your brain to congregate with you and to react to what you've labeled it, because it doesn't really know any different. Your brain's going to do what you tell it to do, whether it is true or it's not true. We in our life today wear very many labels. There's labelings, there's stigma, there's perception and identity. Why don't we put different labels on ourselves? That we are powerful, we are strong, we are confident. Why don't we wear labels like that? Because once we start putting that label on ourselves as inadequate or that all or nothing, I'm never going to do this. Here's my label of failure. And the way my body is, the way my mind is, the way my words are, the way I react to things, you may not necessarily, I don't have to wear that label. You'll see that label on me. Society gives us labels. Why in the world do we want to have that self-defeating label on and predict it for ourselves? We're not going to do that. Your label should be I am. And you choose whatever word that is powerful or dynamic or beautiful or smart or intelligent. Those are the two most powerful words in the universe is I am, because we get to label ourselves. But we know when we put labels on ourselves, that's what is going to appear to everybody around us. Like you would put a label on a child or label on somebody you see walking down the road. There's enough self-directed labels put on us right now. We've got to be the writer of what we want to wear on our labels. It says even worse, the more often you assign yourself or others with negative labels, the more you strengthen those negative pathways in your brain. Whether we relive those labels that were given to us in childhood, that easily come back to us in adulthood, we are not changing those pathways in our brain. So those ruts that we label ourselves, those negative ruts that just become deeper and they grow bigger, and it becomes harder for us to navigate out of those ruts and that negative mindset. Like I'm lazy, or I'm useless, or I'm a failure. We're not gonna wear those labels anymore, but it's up to ourselves to relabel us. And people may call us that, but guess what? We don't have to answer to it. We answer to our own labels and strengthen those own pathways in our brain and start healing and filling in those negative ruts and those negative labels that have been ingrained into us for a long time. And as easy as it is to go in that direction, kind of dictates of how deep those ruts are. And it just lets us know that we got a lot of work, but we're worth it. were definitely worth it. So the next ant is, these all, I feel like I do. Oh, I used that all or nothing ant. The next one is that fortune teller ant. That fortune teller ant thinks they know what will happen in the future, but are only focused on projecting negative outcomes that have very little basis in reality. To me, I like to rename this. This is the Chicken Little. The sky is falling. And the sky's not falling. And sometimes I think that in my brain, I manifest a situation to turn out far worse than it is. That by the time the situation comes and plays itself out, and I'm on the other side of it, and I think that's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. But what I had built up into my mind before the situation occurred was just chaotic, was just catastrophic. And then once it got here, once it happened, and I'm like, that didn't happen anywhere near that I thought it was going to be. I use this example a lot when I do these classes. It's like when my boss calls me into her office and the trajectory of my mind goes, what did I do wrong? Oh no, I'm going to get fired. How am I going to pay for my house? How am I going to continue to put gas in my car? I've already fired myself and lost my house and everything that comes with that thought process. In all actuality, she just needed my opinion on something or my help with something. It had nothing to do with me. But what I manifested was this fortune telling, I have already lost my job. And the short amount of distance from my office to her office, which is this big, I have already lost my job. My house went into foreclosure. I've lost my cars in that minute second. Who else does that? This happens, and sometimes that we go into this automatic negative thought process of this fortune telling, that even if the situation turns out good, we don't give it the accolades that this is good, because we're still waiting for that other proverbial shoe to fall. So we're not even enjoying the good stuff out of it that turned out far better than we could ever imagine, because our brain is still setting us up for failure. It's that fortune-telling ant. All of these are not fun at all. But in reality, I know for myself, I have a lot of these ants that I need to get rid of. The next one we're going to talk about is that mind reader ants. And what this is the mind reader ant believes it knows with 100% certainty what is going on in someone else's mind. Even though the other person has not told you their thoughts or opinions, the mind reader ant tells you exactly what they're thinking. You interpret something, or you manifest what you're trying to get across to this person, that you are so certain that the look on their face is the answer to whatever situation that you are going to be bringing to the table. You may interpret a look from somebody unbeknownst to them. Maybe it's in a store. Maybe you're noticing somebody sitting in a car next to you, and you look at their face and you're going, what is the matter with them? Why are they looking at me like that? They must be having a bad day. And use that automated fortune telling. Unbeknownst to you, my friend, It has nothing to do with you. Perhaps they're lost in their own thoughts, but you have pulled it all to you. And that look, that tone of voice, you are reading that situation and you have already diagnosed it in your head. How many times do you interpret a situation without not knowing anything about what's going on? Whether it be a look, whether it be a tone in somebody's voice, or that negative process that you have already set this situation up to fail, and you're going to let it happen before it even happens because you know you've already read the situation. This says that a sideways glance from your boss means that they hate you and you're about to be fired. Your friend taking too long to reply to a text message means she's mad at you. Then without verification from the other person, this mind-reading ant can cause you to ruminate on your unconfirmed assumptions. Who does that? Who does that? I do. Why haven't they called me back? Why haven't they answered my email? They must think this is a terrible idea. And then I roll all of these automatic negative thought processes and I bulk them into one. How do we stop this from happening in our brains? And that's exactly it. We have to stop it. We have to make a conscious effort to catch it before it runs away with us. We're going to go over one more ant. The last ant we're going to talk about today is that blaming ant. This ant doesn't want you to ever admit your mistakes or ever take responsibility for your actions. Even worse, the blaming ants aren't interested in learning how to fix things or make situations right. They want you to play the victim. I think out of the ants that we've just talked about, this is probably that dangerous, that red ant that stings and can cause pain and swelling. Because this ant robs you of so much stuff. Your joy, your own personal power, because you're always staying in that victim mode, that you lose the willingness or the tendency to change that situation. To me, this is the red ant. Out of all the ones that we talked about, this is the ant that I think keeps us from moving forward. To blame every circumstance, every situation, every negative mindset on something or somebody, or not taking responsibility for our actions. Because this truly robs us of a lot of things in our life. Because I think for a self-inventory, when we try to dissect why we are having this negative thought process, is to understand why we're doing this. And sometimes it's a self-preservation. This particular ant preserves us from not feeling what we really should get to the core of feeling. And we use it as maybe a protection of not dealing with and letting everybody take responsibility for this particular person, which is me. Because my happiness is not attached to anybody or anything, because the responsibility for me and my happiness is that's my total responsibility, because once I put that control on something or somebody, then I feel like that I will never get to a point where I will be happy, because it's dependent upon everything around me, everybody around me, the whole situation needs to go my way. And if it doesn't go my way, then I blame it on that particular thing to not be happy. Your happiness, your joy is your total personal responsibility. Because if you place that decision making on somebody, money, power, persons, people, things, then you're always going to be chasing that. Always going to be chasing that. So to me, that blaming ant is probably the most dangerous out of all of our automatic negative thought processes. But we have to think, and we have to remember that we can take that leash back. We could take that remote control. However that we're going to work through to take this back.